Hey everyone, so today what we're going to be doing is going through Data Challenge 8. Sorry for taking a little bit of time to get this up, just been busy with some other stuff. Anyway, so Data Challenge 8 was sort of like this overall like summary data set associated with the other Yammer data that we were working with in class, right? So the Yammer data, we actually had a total of 4 different data sets, all of which somehow related to one aspect of user engagement. So we looked at search, we looked at interacting with the inbox, things like that. And what we saw sort of across the board in class was all of those sort of had this big drop of engagement at the exact same time, right? So we really couldn't identify from many of those data sets in class what drove it, given they all had the same drop. It suggested some external factor drop the overall reduction in just interaction with all of Yammer. So the data challenge is essentially doing the exact same thing we did in class, looking at patterns of interaction over time. But this way, we're actually going to be looking at the emails data here. So let's go ahead and just run this quick and get this data in. So it'll take a quick second. And let's look at this fourth data set. So as you can see, it has user ID just as we had before, which actually we're not going to need, but the time that it occurred at and what the action was. So just right off the bat, let's add that one column just so we can use that for simple counting. And let's just explore emails quick. So glimpse emails, and what do we see? Okay, so we have our times, and then we have sent weekly digest, sent weekly digest, sent weekly digest. So let's look at the unique levels that are present within action, right? So unique emails, and then we'll do action and run that. Okay, so what you can see here is that this is part of their email, basically marketing side of things. So most companies, they'll often send out an email and then they can track, hey, did you open the email? Did you actually click on something to the email to go to the associated website? And there's also this re-engagement. And so re-engagement could be people who say added something to their cart and never finished checking it out. Like they'll send emails to prompt you, hey, go check out and finish buying this thing, right? But so these are things to where you could imagine that these are going to drive interactions with this site as a whole. And so if we saw low interactions or a drop in of interactions in the data sets in class, right, with interaction in the site, well, maybe the problem lies here in terms of the actually getting people to go to the site. If they just forgot to send out emails or something, you would have a reduction in actual engagement like we saw in class. So what we're going to do is create, our grouped by data frame. So we want to track this over weeks, just as we did in class. So according to my instructions, we're going to create emails weeks here. Let me actually just go ahead and make this easier to read. Appearance, and let's go for there. This is fine. So this should be easier to see on a screen. Okay, and so let's make a data frame emails week, and we want to group by action and week. And we also just want to filter off the ends of the data frame just to sort of make it easier to see on the proper scale. So emails week, and that's going to be made from the data frame emails. And then remember, we're going to group by 2 things. So group by, and we can do action first, and then we can do week. And so that's going to be our new column name, week equals. And then we use a function floor date. And now we got to call our column that contains the date time. So in this case, it's occurred, and like everybody else, I can never spell occurred. And then what level we want to group by. So we want to group by week. We want to tell it, hey, bin it into weeks versus days or hours or something like that. Okay, great. So now we have our group by. And now let's go ahead and give it a summarize function. And so we know that it's going to group by, and if we don't tell it what to do with it, it's not going to actually do anything. So we want to summarize just the number of interactions within a week, right? So we can say, call it, what did I say? I don't say to call it anything. So week actions is fine, equals, and we're just going to sum up that one column as we've been doing. So before we go ahead and filter, I always like to just go ahead and check and make sure this works before we start layering on bits of code. So it looks like it ran. Let's just check it over here. Okay, great. So you can see the email click-through is being binned into individual weeks, which is great. We can check the tail of email weeks. Email weeks. And what do we see? Okay, cool. And so then we see also here's like the tail. So let's go ahead and now let's just add on our little filter. So this will then go rerun this, but then cut off the end. So we want week is, in this case, greater than or equal to, and I'm just going to copy this down just to maintain the formatting. And then we also want and weeks is less than and equal to than the ending time. And this will just take care of those little half bins. We know that our issues don't fall on one of those ends. It's kind of more centered in like the time frame. So we should be fine by just cutting this off. Okay, so we can run this one more time. Error in week. So let's go ahead and diagnose this. Oh, so you can see here, error in weeks. So the data frame, the data column is not called weeks, it's called week. So emails week. One thing that I want to point out is the reason why we're filtering by week is remember that we renamed the column from our new table week. So here we're going to group it by action and week. So we have a new column named week, summarize it. And so in this new data frame, the column is now called week. It's no longer called what it was in emails because of what occurred at. So just something to kind of keep in mind. Great. So check it out to make sure it makes sense. We can do that one more time. Emails week. Right. So it does make sense. Now we have, cut off that one time point. We should be good to go. So now what we're going to do is make a line plot of emails week where each action is a different line. So you want to graph the relationship between the time and the number of events. So again, this is what we were doing in class. So ggplot, we feed it our data, emails week, and then our aesthetic AES. So on X, we want the time, right? Because we want to plot over time. So in this case, our time is week. And then our Y, we want to be week actions. And then I'm saying here, color it by action. And so what this would do is it'll fit an individual line to each action. Equals action. Okay. And then as always, we got to add on whatever our geom is. So in this case, we want it to be a geom line. And that should be good. What do we see? Okay. So this is good. So you can see each one of these lines. And so weekly digest. So this is just sent out on some sort of automated thing. So they've never had any issues or keep on sending out more and more because they're getting more and more users, right? So each user is getting a weekly digest. Similarly, you see a general upward trend in if people are opening the emails, right? So it doesn't seem to be an issue with emails being sent out or emails being open. But what we see is at the time of the overall drop in engagement, we see a really dramatic drop here in email click-through. And so what this to me very clearly suggests is the issue lies in the fact that people weren't able to click through. So someone could have forgot to put in the link, someone could have sent out the weekly email with a broken link, any of these things. But the general point is that this stopped people going to the website as a whole and using Yammer, period. And so something really simple like this could drive this overall drop in user engagement. That's how much people need these emails to kind of keep using the system, to keep people engaged and interacting with it. So this is great. This is actually, I think, like a really cool assignment because you have sort of these like 4 different data products. Each one of these there might be a different team behind it that are all part of this whole data product or this whole website, Yammer, or it was a website at the time. And all it takes is sort of one little issue at one point that can kind of have these long trickle-down effects that will drop the rate at which people are using this product, which is really important if you're a new company. You need to kind of keep this upward trend of engagement. So I have a little bonus here, and what the bonus is getting you to then scale this. So one problem here that I've kind of talked about a little bit in class is we are just looking at raw numbers, right? And so this could be considered like a quote unquote vanity metric, saying, okay, so from this time point to this time point, we saw, we have 1,000 more weekly digests going out. Isn't super meaningful. What would be more meaningful is that we saw a 30% increase in weekly digests being sent out. Similarly, it makes it harder to sort of diagnose issues if you're working with raw numbers, right? This slope right here is just a whole lot steeper than these ones down here. And so if we say down here, we only saw a drop in the number of actions of email click-through by, say, maybe a couple hundred, 100, something like that. And so if you saw that sort of drop in this line up here, the weekly digest, we sent out 100 fewer weekly digests, it would be less impactful. So you might not think it's a big deal. So a better thing is to think about this more in the context of percentages, right? So here we have this very slow increase and a dramatic drop. So this is dropping, some large percentage of the total. And so that's a way to sort of scale this, right? If we saw a 10% drop in weekly digest as well as a 10% drop in click-through, that's really important, right? So let's go ahead and actually then make a percentage. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at how much each week's change contributes to the overall change in whatever the actions are. So we're going to just scale these by the total number of observations in the data set, right? So, here to here is say 10%, here to here is 10%, here to here is 10%, so on and so forth from this total increase. So what we need to do is we need to summarize how much the overall action or change in action we saw, so from start to end, and we're going to divide each week by that. So we're going to say go sum this difference to that difference. So we're going to sum up how many actions we saw and divide then each weekly interval. So we already have the weekly interval done, right? We know each week, emails week. So we have how many were done each week. And so now what we got to do is make a data set that was essentially our original funnel, looking at the total number of actions for each action. So what we're going to do is we're going to do emails total. We're going to call this. We're going to take emails again. So we're going to still work with the raw data frame. We're going to group by, now this time, just action, because we don't need it by week. And then we're going to do the same thing of our summarize. And we're going to say, call this our new total actions is equal to sum 1. And so what do we see here? Emails total. So this is that funnel that we could have made with right here, like that we initially made our bar plot with, or our column plot. So this is how many observations were seen in the whole data set. And so now we need to actually bind this or join this to our data set over here so we can divide each weekly set of actions by the total set of actions, in this case 910. So we need a list of 910 going down this whole thing. And that's where we use a join. And so what we're going to do is we're going to call this something new. So we can call this whatever, join data. And then we're going to do what's called a left join. And feel free to talk to me more about what those are. We've talked with them a little bit in class, but it's not necessarily critical for you to know at this stage. And so what we join is our data set on the left, which in this case, we want it to be emails week, with our data set on the right, emails total. And we can go ahead and just run this straight away. And so it's going to say it's going to join by action. So it's going to look for each place in our left data set, which is here, where there's our action, and there's a matching action in our right data set. And then it's going to take this column on the right and put it down every single one here on the left. So if we just look at join data, we can see that's exactly what it did, right? So now we have total actions, weeks actions. So we can do a mutate, join data is what we want to work with to make our percentage. And so we can do mutate. And we can call this like per change or something. And then equal to week actions. And then we want to divide it by total actions. And then we can also just multiply it by 100 to make it whole numbers. And so let's go ahead and check join data again. Okay, this is great. So this is the percent change per week. So this is like the percentage of each week to this whole total. So it allows to still graph on that same sort of trend, but looking at it on a similar scale. That'll make more sense when we graph it. So I'm actually just going to steal this right here. And let's just make the same graph, but what we're going to do now is use the data joined data. Data. And then now for our response, it's no longer just the raw week actions. We're going to use this percent change, perc change. And let's look at our figure. Okay, so as you can see, this brought everything onto a similar scale, right? So this percent change is the percentage of observations in each week that account for the total observations in the whole data set. And so this allows us to sort of see, again, an equal scale. And so what we can see here is that we see the same trend of, sent weekly digest, because that's sort of an automated thing. But we can see that there's a huge drop in engagements in email click-through in terms of percentage, right? So the raw number might be much smaller than any of the changes in the other data, but the percentage to the overall is much larger. And so here you can see there's this really major over 2% drop, which is much greater than the rest of the things, right? So again, we see emails open consistently, emails sent out consistently, but we see a big drop in the number of click-throughs. So that's how you sort of answer that bonus question. So that's really all there is to it. Again, I think this is a fun data set because it sort of shows you how sort of data science and analytics is applied to solve problems in a business context. As always, let me know if you have any questions, concerns, or comments. Thanks.